The Walt Disney Company is sick, and when you're sick, you need a doctor. And it seems that Dr. Peltz, Dr. Nelson Peltz, is making a home call, a home visit when it comes to Mickey Mouse. He is suggesting now that the Disney Company is suffering, and what it's suffering from, he has the medicine to fix. Bob Iger might not like it, though, but this second opinion is coming, and Nelson Peltz and his Trian group, they have just the right dosage to bring. Let's talk about it right now. Hello folks, welcome back to another video of excellence here on the WDW Pro channel. It's excellent because we chase the truth. We like the truth. We want to bring the truth to you, and we do our very best each and every day. And at least in that way, we try to get as close to excellence as we can. Another man who is chasing that excellence is John Trent from Bounding Into Comics. Welcome back, sir.
It's good to be back. Good to see you.
Absolutely. And John, it's not often that we get to sit down with the author of an article, but in this case, here you are, and also here you are. You have laid it out for us on boundingintocomics.com, where, folks, if you're not yet bookmarked, what are you doing? Make sure it's on your daily reading list. John Trent, the author, that's you. Nelson Peltz explains his objectives and tactics when turning around faltering companies like the Walt Disney Company. Now, the fascinating thing about this, John, and folks, I highly suggest that you click on the link down in the description to read all of this. But, you know, there's many people out there who they are hesitant and reticent to admit that the Disney Company is in need of fixing. But it seems hard for me to believe that you could come with any other conclusion when you realize this company has dropped 60% of its total value in just 2 years. That's exceedingly unhealthy, right? If you were a runner and your 5K time dropped by 60%, you're probably ill. Well, let's read what Nelson Peltz had to say. Investor Nelson Peltz, the founding partner of Trian Fund Management, and yes, no, I know, folks, potato, some people call it Trian, I don't know, explains his objectives and tactics when turning around companies. Peltz recently engaged in a proxy war with the Walt Disney Company and is reportedly looking to take over multiple seats on the company's board of directors. In January this year, Trian Fund Management nominated Peltz for election to the Disney board, claiming the company's share price had declined to near an 8-year low. Boy, has that gotten worse. The company has materially underperformed the S&P 500 over 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10 year periods, down 24, 66, and 116% respectively in comparison. The company also noted Disney's operating performance has deteriorated, including a 50% decline in adjusted earnings per share since 2018, the full year, despite parks profitability surpassing historical levels. After citing these poor figures, Trian declared that Disney's current problems are primarily self-inflicted and need to be addressed. Now, John, a fascinating thing about this, of course, is that it has gotten worse. Walk us through what has happened to the Walt Disney Company and why Nelson Peltz has more leverage going into this next proxy battle.
Yeah, so when he first did the proxy battle back in January, February, he only had around, I think, 900,000 shares of the Walt Disney Company. Now, CNBC and the Wall Street Journal are reporting that he has, I think, $2.5 billion worth of shares. So 900,000.
And in total shares, in quantity shares, you have listed in the article 30 million shares.
Yeah.
Of course, that's different from dollar amounts. We're talking about individual shares, but he's went from 9.4 million to
Correct.
30 million.
Yeah, so he's that's triple, right?
Yes.
The amount of shares that he has. He obviously still sees that the Walt Disney Company is going to struggle. He did indeed recognize that some of the changes that Bob Iger was making back in February seemed to be of his liking, and obviously now they haven't made those changes, I would assume, or they were basically just kind of trying to keep him at bay. And Nelson Peltz isn't one to kind of be kept at bay. Listening to this interview that he did with David Horowitz, where he sees companies that he thinks are extremely undervalued, they're being mismanaged, and he comes in and he makes changes. He gives them a number of changes that he can make, and he turns them around, and he's been very successful at doing that. Looking back at the companies that he has indeed done similar things with, you can look at P&G, which is the most recent one, Procter & Gamble, You can also go back and look at one of his early successes, which was the Heinz ketchup, the ketchup company. Most of us know as the ketchup company. So he has lots more leverage given the fact that he now owns triple the amount of shares that he does own. And now he's also looking to get multiple board seats because as you've noted, the company has not actually turned things around this year. It's gotten indeed worse.
John, why do you think that a large number of people out there will not admit that Disney has issues? And I'm going to give you one example. This is I guess we're going to foreshadow a video that's coming out later this week that I can't believe we're covering it. Not that we're going to cover it, because you absolutely have to cover it, but I can't believe that it's reality. Here's my example. The Jungle Cruise ride at Magic Kingdom in Disney World. Disney spent millions of dollars to come in there and update that ride so that it is now socially acceptable according to Disney, right? And so they went through and made major cultural sensitivity changes, part of their Reimagine Tomorrow initiatives and Story Matters initiatives. And again, under the head of Walt Disney Imagineering, Carmen Smith. Now, just about 1 to 2 years later, we find out that that ride has significant structural damage such that Disney is having to cover up the collapsing facades of the ride, which were not dealt with at the time of the refurbishment because it was all about projecting cultural sensitivities. In other words, there is a collapse of the attraction such that they could actually have to close down the ride, but that was less important to the company than making everybody think that they truly cared about every single person. Guest safety, not so much. Cultural sensitivity and safe spaces on the internet, a whole lot. John, why do people out there not recognize still the situation Disney finds itself in?
I think a lot of people just want to buy into this kind of narrative about kindness, that it's you're being kind to a lot of these the DEI initiatives. It's just being kind, you're being charitable, when indeed you're actually like lying to people's faces and the opposite of kindness. But they really feel like they feel good about themselves by buying into this, that they're actually believing that they're being kind and they're being the morally superior people. And I think that's one of the main reasons why people can't recognize that the company is faltering. And I think there might also be some just kind of how could Disney falter? This is the Walt Disney Company. It's always been a fantastic place, always been doing pretty well, even though you can look back at like the Eisner era and things like that where it did indeed struggle. But I think there might be some rose-colored glasses things happening involved there as well, where they can't see it for for the truth that it is.
I think some of these people too, they're having significant cognitive dissonance because they're asking themselves, how can my ideas, the way that I view the world, be wrong? And if Disney is wrong, and if they believe what Disney has been projecting, boy, that's a real punch in the gut. It's way easier to blame it on anything else that you can than to say, I don't perceive the world in the most realistic way that lets me predict the future and to navigate it well. So that's a tough one for people to take on, but take on they probably will. Here is, here are some quotes that I find very interesting here. Nelson Peltz told Rubenstein, who was having a conversation with him, "We're not an active investor." Okay, now that's a change in how most people project what Nelson Peltz is. Passive versus active. He says he's not an active investor. What we see is what we see really companies that we think were once great. Okay, so that's identifying he thinks Disney was great, have lost their way. Okay, there you go again. And that we have a plan for them to get back to greatness again. And that's what we do. This also, by the way, harkens back to some verbiage that you might hear from particular political campaigns out there that, again, some folks are going to have a major negative reaction to. We're not there to leverage up these companies, he continued. We're not there to split them up. We're not there to do all the terrible things that typically go along with the term activist. We're just trying to get these companies to operate better the way they used to. So it sounds like, and I love, oh my gosh, I love the fact that you put the picture of Luke on there, because I think that is the perfect representation of this company having gone astray.
It is.
So he's looking at board seats. He wants multiple board seats. He may even get up to 3 board seats. What do you think he wants to do with the board seats necessarily?
Yeah, so he actually talks about this a lot in this interview here with Bloomberg Money that he did about a year ago. He talks about how a lot of times he doesn't even want the board seats if the management is willing to actually listen to him. Clearly, the Walt Disney Company is not have an open ear to what Nelson Peltz has to say, so he's going to use the board seats as leverage to enact the changes that he wants to make to the Walt Disney Company that he sees needs to be made. I don't have it in front of me here, but he made a very clear point on what those changes were back in January and February and what he wanted to make. There was a whole press release kind of detailing what those were. I think I have them in the article. I just don't have it pulled up right in front of me now. But I think that's what he wants to do. He wants to get his changes made, and the Walt Disney Company isn't doing it, and he's going to use a board fight to basically try and take control of the company and get those changes made because he's now probably one of the top shareholders in the company.
And it's difficult for the company to fend him off when they have taken the kind of losses that they have. I also want to highlight something that I think, whenever we do these videos, we want people to come in with a particular level of understanding, ideally, but we really want them to walk away having gained something. And so I want to connect some dots here that without this video, perhaps you would never know. So let's connect a dot here using your article once again. And this says, it's talking about his interactions with the Heinz company, which you brought up, the Heinz company that makes the ketchup and the mustard and the relish and all of that, a condiment company, if you will. From there, he used Heinz as an example. He says, look at Heinz, which was our first really aggressive salvo. We became a very large shareholder of Heinz. We went to them with a plan. They didn't want any part of us. They didn't know who we were. And Heinz had a 10-year stint of flat to down sales and earnings the same. And what we saw at Heinz very clearly is that every quarter, every year, the direct market spend declined. He goes on to talk about how they essentially were able to co-opt Heinz into being successful once more against their will. Now, you might wonder, what does this have to do with Disney and Pro? Why are you bringing this particular paragraph up? Now, I bet that John already knows, but John, of course, Teresa Heinz is the individual who is highly connected with the Heinz company, one of the offspring of the founders, and she is, of course, the widow of former U.S. Senator John Heinz, but she is also connected with John Kerry, of course, through marriage. And so that company in particular is one that was very political in many ways, and to some degree still is. And yet it did not stop Mr. Peltz from coming into that company and saying, we're not going to live on the legacy of what you've done. You need to make money again. And it feels very much like he's doing the same thing with the Disney company, coming in and saying, you're not going to survive on Iger's legacy alone. You need to go back to the foundational principles of Walt Disney himself, which is, I think, heavily steeped in simply American entrepreneurialism. And that is that money and capitalism are a system by which you determine, are you successful? And not on false narratives, not on the ideals and idealists of propaganda, but rather, are consumers flocking to what you do or not? And I think that Mr. Peltz is well positioned to come back into another company that has become very political, that being Disney, and straightening it out. And I use that term purposefully, straightening it out, getting it out of the left, get it out of the right, put it right down the middle again, and aim it for as many consumers as you can. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I think I've talked about this a lot. One of the big problems with the Walt Disney Company is the fact that they've embraced this ideology that I think most people can see through as fake and a lie. And they continue to push it, and it divides people. I think we see that on multiple levels. You can see it on a racial level. You see it on a them targeting children level. So I definitely feel like that's one of the areas where Nelson Peltz might be going in. Like, yeah, we're getting out of this. We're getting back to maybe like what the Walt Disney Company used to do. We're going to do some family fun entertainment. We're going to invest in that and create some of those things that are going to do that. And then I wouldn't even be surprised if he maybe has them start bringing up the old Star Wars stuff. If you want to get into the nitty gritty, because we know they have those old Star Wars plans for a Tatooine land. I feel like that still would be a home run hit. You could see something like that in the parks if you wanted to invest in that. So I think there's lots of options for him to really kind of move his weight around here and get the company back on track. And I do think a lot of it has to do with a lot of the ideology that has infected the company. And you were pointing out that ride,
Jungle Cruise.
Right. And I think that so it's not just like the ideology that they're presenting in the movies and the TV shows, but that ideology is obviously, I think, is rampant throughout the company. And I think it has resulted in a brain drain from the company. I feel like you've had some insiders inform you of that in previous videos. And I think that is the case, where you don't have these people that can actually make good rides anymore, keep them operating, perform the maintenance that's required on them.
Right. The hippos can't wiggle their ears anymore, but by golly, they don't appropriate culture. How about that?
Exactly. So you have people that were driven out that knew how to do that stuff, or they were retired, they didn't pass it down, et cetera, because they wanted to push in new people to take those jobs for their kind of DEI, ESG, critical race theory initiatives that they've been pushing. So I definitely feel like that is one of the biggest issues that the entire company is facing, not from just from its storytelling perspective, and then obviously also like how they maintenance their products and things like that, and how they're selling their products. I mean, you talked about the toy sales being down as well. So because a lot of their characters are these kind of ESG DEI properties. The old school characters are the ones that people identify. I think you covered this with Star Wars. R2-D2 was like the most popular character in like a poll compared to the sequel trilogy characters, and even some of the Mandalorian stuff characters. Even with like Grogu, he beat him out. So yeah, that's I think those are the ways that you get to it. You got to go back to what was successful, and I think the path is very clear, and I think Nelson Peltz does indeed have that path laid out, because I think he kind of shared a little bit of what his white paper was when he made his initial demands public back in January, February.
I guess the most amazing thing to me is that this is a company that we're watching, which, just take the Galactic Star Cruiser as an example. All they had to do was swap out the characters, switch to Luke, switch to Leia, switch to Han Solo, switch to Darth Vader, and it would have been a financial, not just a success, it would have been at capacity for years to come. You could not have managed to get a reservation for that thing. They would have been forced to raise prices just to try to reduce the demand. And they would rather, this company, the way it's been run prior to Nelson Peltz, they would rather stick with the characters that don't have any demand, and they would rather shutter the hotel than to admit that they've created a narrative that folks don't want. So, very interesting, and we'll see how it all plays out. One thing that we're always playing with, though, is making sure to check out Bounding into Comics on our browsers. But John, that's not the only place people can find you. Where else can they go on this great, big, beautiful web to find your great content?
Yes, I'm here on YouTube, John F. Trent. I have a channel that covers a lot of short track racing across the country. We do a lot of specifically Cars Tour racing, which is a Mid-Atlantic region race here, kind of in the Virginia, North Carolina region. And then I also cover the Lucas Oil late model dirt series, which they kind of pretty much all over the East Coast, up and down, and then even get out into the Midwest and out into like the Dakotas and things like that. They just ended their season, but there's still lots of drama happening, and there's still a lot of those drivers are finding other races here towards the end of the season. So I like to cover a lot of the short track stuff, and we're doing really well. We're already on pace to trying to get monetized right now. We're really working on getting that the 1,000 subscriber count, because I'm well on the way of getting the 4,000 hour watch time already. But really having a lot of fun on that channel, and it's really something that I enjoy. So that's where you can find me there. And then obviously we have our Bounding into Comics YouTube channel here, where we provide our commentary on entertainment and culture over there.
All right, folks, the links are in the video description down below. Race on over to them and help John get monetized on that racing channel so that he can deliver even more fantastic content as he continues to be one of the leading voices out there in pushing pop culture into a positive direction. Folks, you can also help us in that positive direction. Drop a like down below if you like content like this. Also, share, subscribe, and click it. Stick it to the algorithms. It's the notification bell. This is not just a conversation between two people, but nay, it is a full-on dialogue within a community, and you're part of it. So drop a comment down below. We covet your comments. We care about what you think. The Pro Show is live Thursday, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you're watching this video at the time of release, well, get ready, because Pro, that's me, is going on camera for the very first time for the Pro Show Live this Thursday. It's going to be fun. It's a spooktacular kind of thing. So, folks, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Oh.
What are you doing?
Well, you see, I wanted to get some inside scoops on Disney and their different corporations, if you know what I mean. So I figured by looking into this fistbowl and sucking it randomly with my own energy that I paid for, you paid for, I could do the whole experience where you can be a master and spy on your targets.
You're an idiot. If you want to get the inside scoop on Disney, or even other media organizations, you should check out thatparkplace.com and subscribe to WDW Pro's YouTube channel. That'd be way easier, more accurate, and, less dumb.
Are you saying I won't get accurate information this way?
No, you can't.
Who'd think?